right, everybody. It is Thursday, May 12th at 6 p.m. We are at the Twinsburg Government Center, and we are going to call the districting committee to order. First thing tonight is going to be your oaths of office. So Mr. Bazana is going to go ahead and administer those oaths. So if you guys want to stand up, you have those in front of you if you want to follow along.
You got to remember to stay by the microphone here. So there is an oath in front of you. I will say that sometimes this becomes a little bit difficult to remember all the different words I say. So feel free to grab with your left hand the copy before you, and there is no shame in looking down at it if you feel that I went too fast. So please raise your right hand. I state your name. Do hereby swear that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America.
That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America.
The Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio.
The Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio.
The Charter, ordinances, and resolutions of the City of Twinsburg, Ohio.
The Charter, ordinances, and resolutions of the City of Twinsburg, Ohio.
And will faithfully, honestly, and impartially discharge the duties as a member of the Districting Commission
Discharge the duties as a member of the Districting Commission
to the best of my ability, as I shall answer to God.
to the best of my ability as I shall answer to God.
Great.
All right, perfect. Was it not the same?
All sworn in. If you guys can sign, there's 2 copies there.
Yeah.
Sign both of those, and then we're going to pass those over towards Mr. Bazana, and he will notarize those for us.
Okay.
Once he notarizes them, you'll get 1 copy back, and you also get to keep the copy of the legislation that is attached.
You signed both of them?
I did.
Perfect. I'll take those. Wait around the meeting. Congrats. You're official now.
Thank you.
We can get down to
Very
business.
much.
Thank you.
Now that we're official,
date 'em.
then I will
I'll date them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do the dating, and then I'll stamp them, and then I'll give you 1 copy back. I always say frame it on your wall if you want. The other copy will be kept by our clerk and counsel.
Yep. So next I'm going to go ahead and call the roll. Sue Clark,
Here.
Leonard Taylor,
Here.
Paul Levine,
Here.
Lori Stewart,
Here.
and Mark Little.
Here.
All right, so we have a full commission tonight. Next order of business is to elect a chairperson. So if somebody would like to nominate another member of the committee to chair this, you can do so. And then after we have a motion, then somebody will need to second it, and then we can discuss.
I nominate Sue Clark. Sorry, Sue.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'm going to call the roll for a vote. Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Little?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
And Mrs. Clark?
Yes.
All right, congratulations, Sue. You are the chairperson of the
Congrats.
Districting Commission. So I'm going to hand the meeting over to you. So what you're going to want to do next is ask for an election of the vice chair in the similar fashion that we just did the chair.
Okay. I'd like to call for an election of a vice chairperson.
Are there any nominations?
Mark, you want to do it?
I'm a new one around.
So am I.
We're all new to this.
Yeah.
Point that way.
Oh, point this way? Okay, Paul's telling me to point to my, so.
I think Leonard would be a great.
Yeah,
Leonard?
I think, yeah.
I second that.
Yes.
So who was that motion from?
I
Little?
motion.
Okay.
All right, Leonard.
Seconded by Paul? Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, Mr. Little? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
I thought you were trying to talk me back in.
Mrs. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
And Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Taylor, you are now the vice chairperson.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
We're gonna learn quickly. So I have no idea what I'm.
We'll walk you through it. We only do this every 5 years, guys, so
Yeah.
like, it's not something we do every day, so we're gonna walk you through all of it, so.
That's
You
good.
have, you have to
All right.
read all 600 pages of Robert's Rules of Order
So
by
next-
next meeting.
So next, we make a motion to appoint Shannon Collins as secretary. I'm all in on that.
So,
Is that an official motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Any comments? All right, roll call. Mrs. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Little?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
All right. Moving on. Does not appear we have any.
I was gonna say, it doesn't look like there's any audience participation. Overview of duties, I'm assuming that's Mr. Pizzana.
That is correct.
good evening, everyone. So, feel free to jump in and ask me any questions. I have tried to come up with, frankly, a little bit more to talk about than I think there is. The charge before the commission is very straightforward. I think the difficulty will be, at least to me, the math and moving streets and census blocks around to make sure we fit within the standard. So, but just a little brief background of why we're here tonight. So Charter Section 302 sets forth the process to create the 5 wards of the city. So these are your 5 electoral wards. These are where your 5 ward councilmen come from. Every 5 years, the city has to convene this commission you sit on, to review the existing ward map, which is in front of you, and I believe you got a copy of it attached to an email, or there's at least a copy in front of you today, real big, and unfold it and lay it out. So every 5 years, we have to go revisit the wards, and the standard that the voters in Twinsburg set forth was 10%, so there can't be more than a 10% variance from the smallest ward based on the last general elections list of qualified electors or registered voters. So that's Leonard had asked me some really good questions before we started, and I told him I wanted to go over this briefly because I think this is the question I would ask. This is purely a local process. This is a Twinsburg-centric process. There might be no other community in the state of Ohio that deals with ward districting the same way that we do it here. So, and I use an example for him. Down in Hudson, they deal with their wards. They have 4 wards in Hudson. Those are done every 10 years, and it's based on U.S. Census reports after the completion of the census. So, to reiterate, the question before us tonight is going to be whether or not the wards differ in size by more than 10% of the voters in the smallest ward that we have right now. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So what is the end product that we'll release from this? Once you review the existing map, and we go through the math on it, which I said to me is the hardest part, you then will discuss as a committee or as a commission what you think the map should be. You ultimately have to take a vote to approve this new map, we'll call it, that conforms to that 10% standard. And then we will present that to council in the form of legislation that will have both legal descriptions. Don't worry, we have people that can draw that up. We don't have to learn how to be surveyors over the next few weeks. And then we will also have an attached map. Should council approve that, it will become the new ward map for the city, and that will then dictate, frankly, where you pick your elected officials from. So that's the procedure. Do we have any questions at that point about what we're doing?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes.
So is that, when I see like Ward 3A,
Mm-hmm.
3, that's part of the districting, or is it still just looked at as 5 wards?
Which document are you looking at?
And I see like when I look at
And
the,
so it's the
Leonard,
voting polls.
Yeah, those are precincts. So each ward has 3 precincts.
Yeah.
And so there's an A, B, and a C in each ward. And then, so those are the numbers you see. Wards are the number in front, so we're going to focus on realigning those numbers, like the Ward 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
okay.
Not the A, B, and C.
So the voting precincts?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a little bit different from this.
Okay.
But I do think that ties into what I believe, and Shannon, if I missed something, please chime in. The outside of the math that's necessary, and frankly, just looking at the map and deciding together, how we should change it, because I'll cut to the chase. We are outside of that 10% variance. Shannon has reached out to the Board of Elections, and I believe it was in the first email that was sent out to all of us. We will have to make some changes to conform to the charter. So we do know we can't just pass it as is and say we're fine with how it is. So changes will be necessary. An issue that arose the last time this commission met was, okay, well, here are the changes we want, and they passed that along, and the Board of Elections actually kicked it back. And as I understand it, the previous law director, and I share in this argument, he said to the Board of Elections, this is a purely local process. We can exert what's called our home rule authority, and we will, say this is our map. No one else can get in the way of our home rule power. Ultimately, the Board of Elections said, hey, we create our voting based on census blocks and precincts. So it was kicked back to the city, and they said the map has to conform. I still have the history on this correct, right? The map has to conform to census blocks. So we'll go over that more. We'll kind of like workshop it around this big table here to show you some examples. So we can't just free form the map. We will have to think about the shifts we make. You can't shift just say half of a street if the other half is in the same census block. We're gonna have to kind of play around like that. And that leads me to the only real joke I have about districting commissions is it really just reminds me of like an 8th grade math problem, like a word problem. We're kind of faced with that situation. So it's a very important job, but we're here, Shannon, myself, we also have a GIS person on staff who's gonna help make maps as we roll through this to, put into a picture your ideas. And we'll be double checking all that to make sure we're still working within the census blocks. But that'll make more sense when we dig into that, or when we workshop it here with the maps.
I would assume there's a date that we're working with, there's a date in the beginning and a date at the end, and anything happens after that date doesn't impact what we do, because you gotta have starting point and ending point, and it can't keep moving?
I think I understand your question. Are you talking about the date of the data we work with?
Right.
Yeah, so that is the last November general election.
Okay.
So if you go, and let's just do this because this is another part of the stuff that I wanted to talk about before we dive in. If you look to page 2 of the email. Is the email before everybody? Okay. I'll kind of hold this like this so the mic can still pick me up here. So if you go to page 2 of the email, then you'll see this box here, and it says by ward. And then if you glance up here real quick to how I've done this, you'll see I've highlighted 5 numbers for each of the 5 wards here within this by ward box. So we have 2666, 2729, 3075, 2937, and 2818 for Ward 5. Those are the fixed numbers we're dealing with. So to your question, Mr. Little, those don't change for purposes of the exercise before us. Those are actually the constraints we have to work with. So how we shift, those numbers will still be fixed. However, our job is to move census blocks and shift them in a contiguous fashion as well. I failed to mention that. Like, you can't have like an island of Ward 4 in the middle of Ward 1. We're going to shift along ward boundaries by census blocks to make sure the end result, which won't be a person less or a person more than the total of those 5 numbers, the end result of all 5 of those are all within 10% of the smallest ward number.
So like in Ward
I should have
1,
gone to school for that.
Ward 5 and 2 align to Ward 1, so that's where we're gonna look to make the shift, because it'll fall in the census block. And then like whatever borders 2 and, if it's 2 and 3 and 4, that's how we're gonna do it with the census block. Because I looked at that, okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, once we get around the actual map, it'll kind of all come into play, but what you said is correct, Sue.
Yeah, and to reiterate that point for everybody, or to the point I made before, you can't have island wards or pieces of wards and islands. So the map, and it's nice in local government when the map generally does, follow main highways and natural features. Our map generally will do that because the charter does not permit essentially gerrymandering of the map to create kind of, it's easy if we move this census block over here and that'll level out the numbers. We have a little bit harder task before us, but what it does is it keeps all the wards contiguous and then, of course, conform with the charter.
Mr. Vazana, will you touch real quick on what a census block is and how those are determined? I
need to bring the Board of Elections in on this one. So I personally I'm a big proponent of home rule authority, so.
It's actually from the census block, census information, but
Yeah, no, I'll do this. And I quote.
enforced by.
Census blocks are statistical areas bounded by visible features such as roads, streams, and railroad tracks, and by non-visible boundaries such as property lines, city, township, school district, county limits, and short line-of-sight extensions of roads. Now, that's what a census block is. The census blocks are all labeled. So we're not in a situation where we're like, is that a census block? But just to give you an idea of what the census block is as a unit of measurement in the Board of Elections world, they generally, like I said, will run along boundaries that are either natural or political. And in this case, we have a map here that we'll see here when we kind of start digging in that will show you the census blocks, and then Shannon and I will both explain how that's denoted on this census block map, and you can start thinking about it. Now, I should have said this at the beginning. Tonight, we're just trying to get all of us familiarized with what our charge is, answer any question whatsoever that you may have about how do we handle that, and what's our goal. What we're hoping that we can all go home with as our homework is you'll understand the question, the charge, what we need to do, and you can start thinking about it. I mean, that's the purpose of this commission. And then we're here to help, if you need a question about a map, or maybe you want to see something else, we can relay that over to the GIS guy in the city, and we'll create that and we can bring it back, and then we can workshop that, and we'll get to a point where we're all in a position where we feel good about the proposal, and then we would vote on it again, like I said, move it into legislation, and then present it to council. So yeah, thank you. That's census blocks. I think at that point, I'd like to go back to any questions that you may have about what we're doing, and then I think I told myself I was going to do 5 minutes. We're already pushing 20, so that means I'm talking too much. We should probably start looking at the ward map and stop listening to me drone on. But before that, any questions about the charge before us, what we need to do, how long we have to do it? We have enough time. I mean, if you start going months and months and months and months, we'll have to chat about that. But it's, I think, what's it, the first, January 10th?
January 5th.
January 5th, sorry.
But the board of elections would like it in it as soon as we can get it to them, because they have a lot of work they have to do on their end to make sure it's ready. And they have to go through the approval process, make sure we stay within the census blocks and all of that too.
Yeah.
So.
We will probably, at least what I'm going to do, I'm going to send over, we'll make sure we get their approval on what's designed from the standpoint of not running into what happened back in 2015 that would take, I think, into 2017 when the objection was made by the board based on the census blocks, like I explained earlier. So what we'll do in that case is we'll kind of send them a draft once you guys are ready. And we'll say, hey, make sure we're not missing something here. We don't want to be in the same situation before. Let us know we're good on the census block, precinct, voting questions. So.
Well, it looks like Ward 1 by here has the most. So that might work out though, because it's the most kind of fragmented too for us to pull from, because they've got like Whispering Woods. So when we divide it, that might make it a little easier, wouldn't it?
When you say has the most.
Like by ward, so it's got 3,075. But
That's Ward 3.
That's Ward 3.
Ward 3.
yeah.
Why don't we dig into the map?
You guys gonna come up by the map?
Yeah. That's a good question.
So there's two different maps here in front of us, guys. I wanted to make sure that we showed you guys what we had going on. This is with the census blocks on this one, and what this map is. I kind of, if you guys want to all stand on one thing, I thought we could see it this way. It's not working out. It's not going to work out. So what we have with this one, you can see the changes that were made in the last, from the 2009 map, ward map, to the changes that were originally made in 14 and back and forth. So we wound up at 2017 with the official ward map. That's how we got here. So you can see where all the blocks are. Those are some of the changes that the last districting commission had to make that were ultimately finally approved by the Board of Elections and Council. So I just want to give you an idea of what we did there. What we're going to focus on is going to be our current map with the census block overlay, which they're not actual blocks. Like Matt was saying, it's based on, you know, roads and railroad tracks and streams and things like that. So you'll just notice census block, like we can use this one here, 2006. So what the census block is everything in here. So believe it or not, that's all one census block. And so, but then you'll look how small these census blocks look, but it's based on population, and this is a lot of industrial area here with very few residential. So that's why it's so large, okay? We're gonna focus on the colors. Anything outside in the white is not City of Twinsburg. It's Township, Macedonia, Reminderville, etc. So areas, when you look at the numbers, so the difference between the largest ward and the smallest ward is 409, okay? And what Matt was saying before too is they have to touch. You can't make an island. So you'll notice over here how they had to pull, and that's kind of where it's almost like a shifting process to get us where we need to be. So what you'll want to look at is, obviously we're going to have to add to 1. So you're going to want to look at the wards that touch Ward 1. So you're going to want to look at Ward 2 and Ward 5, because that's how we're going to get people to Ward 1. What will happen is, as we shift those people, we still have to make sure one of those wards falls within the 10%. So then we may have to pull, the most logical thing is to pull from 3, because 3 touches both of those, and that is the largest. So Ward 4 is your standard Ward 4 over here, but you have the opportunity to, if you need to, you can pull from 4 into 5, because they touch, okay? Does anybody have questions on that piece so far? I know the census block things are a little hard to read and stuff. So when they do census block, this is the other weird part. Okay, so let's go in here. So census block, this is the Glenwood Acres area. So a lot of times you'll notice that your neighbor across the street doesn't vote in the same area or the same precinct as you sometimes. And what that kind of comes down to are the way the census blocks are derived, and then furthermore the precincts. So block 5007, everything on this side of Westwood and this side of, what's that one? The Dorridge, those are all in block 507. But the neighbors on the other side of each of those streets are gonna fall to a different census block. So you're not gonna, when we move a block, you have to move everyone in the block over to the new area. So that, it gets a little funny. And as what I'll ask you guys to do is, when you take your homework home, you guys all have the census block map to take home with you. I also have the other map, but I feel like this one's gonna be the most helpful for you. I'm happy to give you both. What you're gonna wanna look at is, when you're coming up with ideas, the easiest thing to do is be like, hey, if say we wanna pull from this area of 2, what we'll want to do is say, hey Shannon, can we get census block number, or the voters for blocks, you know, 2000, 2002, and 2001, and then I can see how many registered voters there are in those blocks, and say, okay, if we move 30 people over to here, you know, what other blocks are you looking at to backfill? So if you guys, when you're looking at it, if you can give me census block numbers, I can pull the data of how many registered voters there are in census blocks, and then we can all kind of come together and kind of come up with some good options. But it's completely up to you guys on where you guys want to look at making those adjustments.
And like you said, our number is 409.
So that's the difference between the largest and the smallest. So
10% of would be, so about 260 votes you need, right?
give or take,
10% of.
yeah, so
Would it be easier to pull the census report and tell us how many are in each one before?
So, well,
Yeah.
so, but what I'm saying, like, is if you guys say, like, this kind of makes sense to pull, you know, from these areas, but obviously it doesn't make sense to pull from here because that doesn't necessarily touch this. So if you guys want to look at this and look at 5 and 2 and say, hey, give me from here this way any of the census blocks that touch, I can pull that and email that to you guys. But I want to give you guys as much data to start considering.
I didn't know if it was a lot of work for you to like pull and tell us which block before we start looking so we can,
Yeah, so our GIS guy is amazing, and he kind of did these overlays for us. What he's working on is actually the census, some of the census block stuff just kind of got published, believe it or not, a couple years ago. But we have that, what he's trying to do is hit that up against the address stuff with the Board of Elections, so that he can tell us block by block where they are. But if I don't have to make him do the whole city, if I can tell him like, hey, do this, he can focus there first for us.
like leave the industrial out and just focus on.
Yeah. So those are just some things, because obviously once we start pulling from one of these, we're gonna have to start pulling from there also.
So each block on this map, I only have one contact, and actually have the amount of people in that census block, or is that?
That's the data that we have to get with our GIS guy.
Okay.
Mhm. And he can help us do all that. The goal would be to have that before we kind of get to our next meeting, so. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any direction for me to go by, if you want to work on like these areas and get those census block numbers. Because we don't really, like we need census block numbers here, but we know the total for Ward 1, so we really just need to add in to get that from one of these ones that touch it.
That'll change the smallest ward number,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, this is the smallest ward, so when we start pulling, we need the census block numbers here to know how many to push here, and then obviously we'll be probably touching census blocks there.
Yeah, 'cause I'm thinking we're gonna.
Largest ward is gonna be 3. They have 3,075 registered voters in Ward 3. And your Ward 1 has 2,666. So,
Yeah, you just like looking like, you know, these are all right here, you know, it seems like, or even, you know, that.
It looks like
Yeah.
5 would probably be the best bet to pull some
Right.
from, because 2's
Right,
already
that's what I-
close, yeah.
mhm.
So that's what I was thinking, if we, I know we'll have to adjust.
Yeah.
some, But,
we just have to make sure we follow that census block, you know? So, you'll notice, like since you mentioned Ward 5 and Ward 1, you'll notice there were some changes from 5 to 1 already in the last one. So the striped ones are where things have been moved, and it tells you from and where it went to. So as you can see, it looks like Ward 1, and it was the smallest ward last time too, because it looks like we had to take from 2 and we had to take from 5 to get them
Which
within the
makes
10%.
goofy split that we talked about.
Yeah.
Like where
Mhm.
George, the end of Idlewood got split
Yeah.
to Ward 5 by the park,
Mhm.
and Sam got.
Because we had to follow the center of the road to
Got
stay
it
within the
now.
census
Yep.
block.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's why Sam got those 6 houses in actually Corbett's Farm. That
Yeah.
makes sense now.
And then you see where they took from 3 to probably backfill some of 2, which was probably, I'm assuming, the second smallest ward at the time.
So besides obviously trying to use the simplest math, the least amount of X, Y, Z, whatever, is there any political thing behind, I would think.
This is completely not political,
Right,
it's
no, I mean,
based
like,
on the
would
numbers
it be
here.
like, I've been in Ward 2 forever, and and then you have, say, Ward 3, some of the new, I know this is where I live, so some of the newer developments will have less of I guess, affiliation, or less of that.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense? Like, I've only been here 3 years, I don't.
Honestly, a lot of people don't know.
They don't.
You would be surprised, you would be surprised how many
But I'm just
people,
like, yeah,
you're exactly right. Leading up to election time, we field so many calls, like, hey, can you tell me what ward
Right.
where I go to vote, so.
What ward I say,
So,
it's
yeah,
like
so
one
one-
word, one teacher.
Yeah, probably people who pay attention would be like, hey, I've been in Ward 1 forever, but for the most part, I think it's probably gonna
We
be,
gotta have a ward softball tournament.
I don't know.
So what was the question?
Have you had backlash from people being moved from one ward to another?
No, so
Or people don't
when
like it?
when they have to switch wards, it's on the Board of Elections to
Yeah, so they
then
can
process and notify with the new
So
postcard
you gotta
saying
give
like, hey,
people from-
this is where you vote now. So
Yeah,
that's what they will take on, and that's
okay.
part of the reason they want enough notice on things like that, so they can
Don't
get
feel-
all of those
yeah.
things
Right.
taken.
Unless
It looks like they're doing it.
Unless you were planning on running for
That's
that
right.
ward, it really doesn't,
Right, yeah.
I have all my signs for Ward 3.
And that's why we do this on non-election years typically. Typical non-election years is when this gets done.
Okay.
So that it doesn't affect, the immediate or anybody who may have pulled petitions or things like that. So So yeah, do you guys have any recommendations? Paul, what I was kind of hearing was and Lori, I think too, you guys are pointing to these two. Do you want me to get census block numbers for you guys on those three, since we know we may have to pull? Because you could technically pull this one to either 5 or 2 there, and then this one could go to 2.
Yes.
Do you have any areas in Ward 5 that you want to focus on getting some census block numbers for that?
Say whatever's the largest at this point, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you haven't moved 260, 200, I mean, I can look back and do the simple.
It's hard to tell, because while you look at, you know, a census block, like my house, we have 4 registered voters because I have 2 adult children that
Gotcha.
live there. So it's hard to like base it on that, but like my neighbor, there might be a single person living in that house, you know? So it's hard to just say like, hey, that looks like a good spot until we get those numbers.
Until we get the numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
Until we get the numbers, it's just a guessing.
Like, yeah, like census block wise, what kind of would make sense to you guys to kind of look at polling?
To me, like, this would make sense to pull into 5.
So right now,
Or
4
into-
doesn't have to be, you can.
Four has 2,900.
Right, that's like your middle, your middle one, you know?
Okay,
So it's the second highest.
yeah.
Could
But-
maybe pull, like if we take
Our-
from 5 to go to 1, we could maybe pull from here or here.
So, yeah, so our focus is gonna be, you're gonna have to either take from 2 or 5 to get to 1. And then maybe backfill,
Yeah.
and then backfill from there.
The whole point is
You want
basically
to
get 3 small.
minimize
Yeah.
the amount
Yes.
of moves.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why I'm looking for all the options you guys have, so we can look at those census blocks.
Right.
And then determine if we move block, 2008, that can get us halfway there.
Right.
You know, so yes, that's kind of would be part of the goal. You are correct. Up to you guys completely on how we handle this. The goal when we leave here is just give me some ideas on census blocks. We'll start pulling those numbers, and that way you guys have a little bit more to work with.
I mean, to me, it just seems like, so say like just this street, so this whole thing could be moved over here, type of thing. Because that's all,
So if you're gonna add to 2, you have to take then from 2 to get to 1. So where would you want to take from to
then I
get
would
census
probably do
numbers?
it up here, because isn't this, let's see. Wait, let's
Their
tie
back
in.
street.
Wait, that's where that, Sharon Road.
Mark, I stole your map. Just so you guys have 2 maps. So thanks. So there, that way you guys can look. Leonard, do you want to come over here, and then you guys, that way everybody's not trying to look at one map. You guys can have 2 to look at.
So I'm in the middle, so I can go back and forth.
Yeah. So yeah.
Are you gonna change the name here?
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
But baby steps here. Let's focus.
I know Ted real well, so,
Yeah.
I know Sam well, so.
Yeah,
So do you guys, what I'm hearing is maybe pull the census block numbers?
yeah.
Okay. So go 2008, 10, 7, 13, 11, 11, and 10. Okay.
And then maybe we can't, if it's not too much, pull this. So we get
Yeah, there's only
something-
4 blocks in that whole
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
So that's Ward 5. We're gonna look at
Because I think it would be good to keep people in there.
4,000.
Like
Close
the
to where they're at.
developments still, I mean,
Yeah, close as we can to where they are.
right.
Okay. All right, so Ward 5, I have 4 census blocks to pull from there. Okay, any other areas of Ward 5 that you want looked at, or Ward 2? We don't have anything from Ward 2 yet. We're gonna have to, if we're gonna push these to 2, again, you're gonna have to take from 2 to get to
So,
1,
I don't know,
more than
maybe
likely.
this area, you guys
I
think?
think either here or here, just because it'd be, again, you're gonna have
Yeah.
a cluster in the middle, in the middle. Where, I mean, then again, it would just be.
Maybe here like 2
Like
acres.
Sharon
This
Brook
is-
area.
This is the old Heritage Hills. This gets, where is this? This is Gills and White Oak. That's 3, what's down?
So this is all the school's property here.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe,
So yeah, this
That block
this
is-
block probably isn't gonna get us a whole lot.
yeah,
Right.
But-
maybe the B2 block. Because that's kind of like the old
So-
Heritage Hills where.
So, okay, this right here is Old Heritage Hills. This is
Yeah.
the new part of Heritage Hills. These are gonna be your 2 sets of condos that are there. And then this is also condo / cluster homes in here. These are houses here, and these are cluster homes here. So when you go up Chamberlain Road to the left there, there's a couple clusters, and then you have the developments
The only
here.
thing I'm thinking, Sue, is would it make sense to take,
C2?
just because of looking at the line,
Correct.
where, because I see where you were going with
Yeah.
this, but then we would be like, you know.
Maybe you just get a grab a
I don't know,
like C2.
So grab a boat, yeah, because we don't know how
Okay.
many people we're dealing with.
That's
Yeah.
what
That's a good idea.
Dealing with an area that has maybe older folks compared
Right,
to younger
Because that's how
folks.
one is.
Yeah, that's a
You
good
don't
point.
want, you kind of want them to have a well-rounded, or do you want them to all have the same voice?
This
You know,
is
so
all
which is it, more
voter driven
well-rounded,
too,
younger
isn't it?
voters,
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
more younger
This is
voters
all
come to one?
voter driven.
Yeah, I think it's more
It's
mixed,
not
because I think.
population.
It's
I think
by
the reason
voter,
that
yes, that's
Ward
correct.
one
So in the
is number
conversations
of
with
the
the Board
year,
of
because it is
Elections,
older, like,
we
all my neighbors
are
in their 90s,
one of
and they're single homes.
who,
So they're gonna end up,
locations in all of Summit County that use
unfortunately, in the next probably 5
voters
years,
versus the
This is-
population.
swing again.
So,
you
because
know.
we are unique in that way.
Okay.
So
Yes,
there
that's a
should
good
be-
mix.
I think
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's
moving
important
down
to Ward one.
I'm more familiar with
Mix.
these census
Yeah.
numbers
Yeah.
Where this
to
is,
build
um,
more, so this is a unique
Yeah,
this is probably
Twinsburg
mixed.
charter.
that's probably mixed too.
Right.
Probably not here, because that's the newer.
Yes.
Is gonna end up like
Right.
Ward 1.
Like I said,
Yeah, and like
It's a complicated
this
math
area
problem,
here, like these blocks that are in here, there's also, you could bubble from there
Right.
or bubble from here, or
Yeah.
however. So I have all these 5 blocks right here on the list. I have all of these on the list.
Yeah, that's
And then, we put these blocks on the list from 5.
That gives us a good start.
Okay, that at least narrows it down so I can ask our JS guy to focus on those, 15 or so
Yeah.
census blocks to get us those numbers.
Just choose at some point just to take the initial instead of splitting them.
That it just causes more.
Right.
That made it broader to try.
Well, getting
Well,
younger
I don't know what I'm
families
saying.
too
Right.
would help, even if we
Right.
pulled some of these
Yeah.
and some of 5.
Right.
Because it's gonna help with this as it declines, because it is, I mean, in 7 houses, youngest person next to us, 78 years old. That's the youngest. I mean, all the rest of them are like 90s, 87s. So this is, I think, Sam's ward is gonna struggle over the next.
But then you. have to
Obviously,
start
you
doing-
can
Yeah.
tell that it was
Switch.
probably
Yes.
the smallest back then too, so it already
Correct.
is kind of in that stage
Which-
of that
So
cycle.
Lori's right, if we kind of look at families, maybe we can start pulling that in there to change the the demographics going forward,
Okay.
which
Yeah,
might be
which
good.
this,
More of a representation of.
Yeah.
of
this
what
too,
the-
mix.
of what
this is,
three,
Correct.
threes-
Sorry,
More younger,
so
but
that's
for
205 or 209.
2004, 2005, and
That's what
2009.
Yeah, this might be
More
wise.
of a-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
no, that makes
being
sense.
fair.
Yeah, because that area right there is going to be, I'm blanking out.
That's what I'm trying to think.
I can,
I,
gosh, there was the, oh.
I know,
Like,
I'm trying to.
clap.
Like, yes.
I was like,
I know,
oh,
I know. I'm like, I know somebody who lives on Jennifer. Like, what the heck is that
Yeah,
development?
that's like
So
clap.
that's, so that's gonna be like this, families.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so I will get our GIS guy to start working on some numbers with this. Your homework, you guys are all gonna take home a census block map with you. So maybe it's gonna be kind of hard to get those numbers, but if you start to think like, hey, we didn't talk about this, shoot me an email, just reply all to that email so we're all kept in the loop, and then I'll just add that census block or 2 to get those numbers, and then we can come back and start looking at some stuff, and then we can have the GIS guy kind of, if we have like a couple versions we want him to pull together, we can have a couple maps made and see what you guys think makes the most sense.
And we're still doing the 26th then, is that?
So I want to talk about that. I'll wait till Leonard comes back. There was a couple people that could not make the 26th,
Okay.
so I wanted to see. We did happen to free up some Mondays here in council chambers. It was between juggling the room and everything else. So we do have some options for some Monday meetings too, moving forward. So we'll talk about that and get our next meeting set before we leave here
good.
tonight.
Okay.
And then I'm on
Yeah.
vacation for that.
Then you're on vacation for the 3rd one. There's zero pressure, like Matt said, we have time. I want to keep everybody in mind that we do
Right.
have council book that goes on recess, and we do have to get this to them also. Not necessarily before recess, but if we can at least start that process
That one might
prior
be
to
the one
recess.
that's rough for me too, is the 9th.
Okay.
Because
So-
we're going to the other banks, we leave on the 10th.
Yeah, so, yeah,
If I'm proactive and have everything ready, I'm good.
Oh, gosh.
So,
That never works.
what I can
It won't
do
be that
too is
bad.
get these numbers from you guys, and we can, if you guys shoot me some stuff back via email too, I can have the GIS guys start mapping some stuff so that next meeting we're like, we have a lot of good data and a lot of good info to go off of,
Okay.
so.
If we decide that we want to, do we can we meet on our own, or does it have to be here? No, okay.
Yeah, right.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, before we go, I
You were
forgot.
gonna say that, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a couple.
Don't walk outside of class when I got told.
I got a couple things related to that to talk about. So if
Are we good with the maps? You guys want to sit back down?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll hold it up for Mark.
I'm good. We're gonna move the 26th. I'm having procedures on that day, so that's good.
Oh, yeah.
So-
Okay, well,
So Sue just
So, yeah.
brought up a really great question that is an amazing segue into what I'm going to bore everybody to death with here for like 2 minutes. So the districting commission is a committee of the city, and that means it's subject, you are subject to the sunshine laws, the commission is subject to the sunshine laws. What are the sunshine laws? Sunshine laws are 2 separate acts. You have the Ohio Public Records Act and the Ohio Open Meetings Act. Sue asked a great question about what if, if we get together, outside of this room. No. The business we do is done here in this room at a publicly noticed meeting like it is tonight. So don't talk about your ideas outside of this room with any of your fellow commission members. Save those ideas for when we're all here together and the public can fill the audience and watch. Now, that brings me to the other piece we'll mention about public meetings. Shannon made a great point. I was thinking it while we were all standing there looking at the map. My guess is there's going to be a couple other census blocks that people say, hey, can you go look that up, see how many people live there, I want to play around with it. You can send it out to everybody, including, make sure you send it to Shannon. She's the one that'll get the information, but you can send it out to everybody, but I don't want anyone else sending back, oh, I don't want to hear the numbers for that, because that could be argued to be some kind of a discussion about it. I don't think it is in that case, but that could be argued to be having a meeting that wasn't advance notice to the public, having that email conversation. So that's really the only 2 parts of the Public Meetings Act I think is important for us. Like I said, we'll just talk about it all in here when these mics are on. Your appointed clerk, Shannon's going to keep minutes of the meetings as well. That will form the official record of your duties and what you end up deciding as a map. And then finally, of equal importance under the Ohio Sunshine Laws are the public records rules. So we talked about email. That's the bulk of the challenges and the litigation nowadays as it relates to public records. And that, in a sense, for anybody here that doesn't have experience with it, any of the documents that we create, think these maps right here, that are a part of our public business, to paraphrase the words of the statute, are open for inspection to the public unless there are exceptions that prohibit that inspection. The most common exception, I always joke, it's basically just me. If there's advice that I provide legally to, say, this commission on your duties, if I was providing you legal advice, that wouldn't be subject to disclosure to somebody, and it can be anybody, they don't have to identify themselves, who wanted to get that communication. So to recap, we're going to talk all about our map only in this room, and it's going to be with the mics on, with advance notice. And then anytime you send an email, just assume that someone in the public anywhere in this country, out of this country, can request it and see it. Because the reality is all of the emails that you'll be shooting back and forth is likely going to be related to this business here and probably won't involve requests for legal advice. At least hopefully at this stage, we won't need any legal advice. So do you have any questions about public meetings or public records? That wasn't too bad. We'll do the 102 session towards the end. There's some more quirks to all of that. Shannon, thank you for letting me dive in there on the agenda with the Open Meetings Act stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. Does anybody have anything else?
We have no members to excuse. I think we're good there. Future meeting dates.
So in the original email, we had a couple dates that were put out there as far as availability of council chambers and asked everybody to kind of look at their calendars. I think we have a couple conflicts with the next 2 meetings that were proposed, which were the May 26th and June 9th dates. I don't know what everybody's availability is on Monday evenings, but we do have a couple Mondays that are available in council chambers now. So May 23rd I know June 6th might be a problem for one, at least that was going to be out of town. And we also have June 21st, which is actually a Tuesday. Those are a couple other dates we can look at. I don't know if those work for anybody.
I'm good with any of those.
No, I'm going
Same as well.
Yeah.
after the 28th, I'm okay. Of May,
So the 23rd doesn't work?
no,
Okay.
yeah, I'm out of state.
Does anybody have a problem with Tuesday, the 31st of May?
I don't.
I'm okay.
Fine.
Fine.
I'm checking. I think I'm okay with May 31st, Tuesday.
Yeah. If that looks good for everybody, we will get the next meeting set for Tuesday, May 31st at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. And then future meetings will be kind of based on what develops from that and how many more we need to have.
Okay.
Does that sound like a plan?
Are we going to do the 621 as well?
If you guys want to pencil in, we could pencil in 621 if that looks good for everybody. Go ahead and get that penciled in, and if we don't need it, we can always cancel it.
Okay.
Does that sound like a plan?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that one too.
Okay.
Okay, so future meetings are
And what was
set.
that, I'm sorry, what was the day in June?
6/21.
Okay,
I'll also send an email out to you guys with that information.
okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay.
Then the next thing is adjourning, unless
Before we do
anybody.
that, Madam Chair, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody for volunteering their time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For
Welcome
Thanks
aboard.
for your time.
not volunteering,
This is gonna
agreeing
be
to
interesting.
I'd like to say happy
Participate
birthday
in
to
something.
Sue and Leonard.
Oh,
Oh, thank you all.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you too.
I also left my business card there if you have any questions.
Okay.
We're good.
Move we adjourn?
Yep, we're gonna, move to adjourn the meeting and we're good, I think.
Is there a second? I'll second.
Second? We're still, it's gonna take us a while to get used to that.
Yeah.
Mrs. Clark. I'm gonna call the roll real quick. Mrs. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard? Or Mr. Taylor?
Who seconded it?
I thought Leonard did.
You
I'll make
seconded it?
I moved to.
Oh,
adjourn.
okay.
Yeah.
She seconded.
Ah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
sorry for
That
I'm
works out,
sorry.
it's
Thank you
fine.
thank you for clarifying.
She seconded.
All right, new role. Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Levine.
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Little.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned
Sure.
at 6